Hey Maddie, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about two things, Michelle, being spiky and or being well-rounded. It's two buzzwords in college admissions. We're going to go over what they mean as far as your application goes and how to best do both examples to still get into the top schools you want to get into. Let's do it.
Awesome.
Okay, Michelle, we're going to begin with two definitions. One is being spiky and the other is being well-rounded. Okay?
Okay.
I'm sure you've heard those terms. They're very
Hmm.
popular in college admissions. As I often do when I'm talking about these, I have to be like, what do they actually mean?
Right.
So, spiky, I came up with it. Spiky, having a clear and supportive focus within your academic and extracurricular interests. Spikes usually work best when said focus matches the major you're applying to schools with. So it's yes, but I think spiky, it's mostly about a focus and like a supportive focus of a certain activity. Spikes can be non-academic, however, I don't recommend that. So like we're not going to talk about that today. With my students being spiky, they are always spiky within an academic realm.
Hmm.
And basically, the example I have here is a math student. I kind of dug around through like former student applications and kind of looked for like, well, who were the spiky math kids and kind of put their stuff together. So imagine this. The classes, she's taken multivariable calculus, AP calculus, BC, AP physics, AP physics 2. She's also taking college courses like Fibonacci identities, combination optimization, cubic formulas, and Markov chains, whatever those mean. Her extracurriculars, she's a math tutor, she's leader of the middle school mathletes team, and she's a purveyor of math-based origami with presentations at art math/math conferences. And then her awards, she's a math Olympiad semifinalist and AMC math qualifier.
Mm.
So spiky when done well is pretty like simple and straightforward, and like that's we'll get into like why that's really a good thing. Not included here are would have been a bunch of other stuff. So the theoretical student also took like AP Spanish probably, and
Right.
was on the robotics team. She may have been like on debate. Like I don't want to think that like being spiky means you literally don't do anything else or like it doesn't come up. It's more that when a student is spiky, there's an obvious, well, spike, that's kind of the
Hmm.
idea of what their interests are. And it's very evident and apparent both just like on paper with their ECs and their classes and everything, but also when we get to their essays, they're equally spiky. So like that's something that's very
Okay.
important is being spiky does not mean that you ignore or like, simply like did not do anything else. It is instead very much an intention and really a strategy for the actual application process that you are focusing upon certain things you do. And that's generally going to be easier if you really did just focus upon one subject. A former episode I'll be referencing a lot, there's two of them, it's FLL, but also backing up your major. Like backing up your major, I
Right.
think we talked about a little bit of this. Like that leads to being spiky in the case. And I'll note here that the majority of students that we work with either already pretty much are, or the work we do tends to make them spiky.
Hmm.
I would say the majority. And very important, that spike always happens to be the major they are applying for the schools they're applying to the point where if they like that is you can also talk about like the strategic positioning is like it is often easiest to be spiky with whatever you have best done in school. So if you're like not sure what you should be spiky about, it's a combination of first, like, well, what are you applying? And does that match the work you've done?
Yeah.
Great. If not, well, that's when you can kind of consider like if all you have is Spanish stuff, like maybe you should be applying Spanish and that should be your spike.
Right.
It's important, like you that is very important in my strategy is your spike must match the major you're applying. Like do not be spiky for Spanish or for linguistics if you are applying physics. Like that does not work.
Hmm.
It's all about everything like making sense and matching, as we'll get to, because then we come into part of this application is here the essays that this theoretical student wrote. Okay,
Right.
their personal statement was on the beauty of origami math. It was like
Hmm.
then they have a supplement on teaching a 9-year-old advanced trigonometry because it's actually simpler than basic geometry. And like you can imagine, like that's basically kind of a fun essay where it's
Yeah.
like, and that gets into like what I made that one up by the way, so don't get mad if like that doesn't make any sense. But that's the basic idea. Is like it's talking about her tutoring and but also covering the
Hmm.
math stuff. Very important. All of her why school stuff, basically all the reasons she wants to go to the schools are about math. Like it's all the math opportunities that she wants to be taking advantage of at those schools. Math, 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 math. The other supplements could be about something else, I guess. Like that's
Hmm.
this. I remember this is a similar conversation backing up your majors. Like yeah, then there's also one about how her and her grandfather toured America or something. I don't know. Like or but I promise you, I'd be like, "Yo, was there any math involved in this tour?" Like that's what I
Right.
would do.
Right.
And she'd be like, "Yeah." I'd be like, "Yeah, can you just like throw in like a math museum?" I think of and this is where Spikey's helpful. Like I remember it was a student I only worked with very briefly, and he was applying, I think, physics to top schools, and he had an essay that he'd written about how he helped a friend with like a Spanish paper or a Spanish project. And it wasn't really about the subject matter at all. It was just like it was about like helping a friend out. And I swear I was like, "Yo, can this be a physics assignment instead?" And he was like, "Why?" It's like because you're applying physics and everything else is about your physics. Like can this just like it doesn't matter, but like can you change that? He goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Great. So let's make this a physics assignment." And like that's I guess that's lying, but like that's where being spiky is so helpful. It's where it's helpful for me. Like I'll get to like why it's effective. That is what I think of over and over and over again is like you have that goal. Like it's go back probably the backing up your major episode. You can link it here, Charlene. Like that one covers a lot of the same ground. Why being spiky is effective because of, like it is making it. You are creating a very clear application for whoever's looking at it. It's like you are the math kid in this case. You have all
Right.
you love math. You do tons of math. You're passionate about it. You've written about it, and you want to be doing math, and you want to be taking advantage of these math opportunities at their school. It's very easy to be like, yeah, this kid makes sense. Like we know where to slot him. Yeah. Okay. So why being spiky works. Please do not take this episode as like you have to be spiky. Although I think in doing my notes and talking about it, it's like being spiky is pretty good. Like it's what we
Mhm.
do. One, schools do kind of like it. So this one is what people might think is, but what I'm not saying is that like you have to be spiky. Like that is actually kind of an outdated philosophy. So anyone tell me, Michelle, have you heard this phrase like schools are not looking for well-rounded students; they're looking for specialists to create a well-rounded class. Have you heard that?
Yes.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
That's from a 2012 article that was pretty influential in the college admission space that I actually read and kind of took the wrong advice for like my first year. Like my essays, like I think I did a poor job, but basically that mindset up until for in a certain period that was actually how you got into college. Like that's I think that's pretty important. I tell students until around like 2015, 2016 range, I
Mhm.
believe there was like I'm in like the late 2000s. I'm in the more is more era, which is you had to be the leader of a billion clubs and do soccer
Right.
and I think schools didn't like that as much. And I think around maybe like 2010ish until the mid to late 2010s, I think like spiky was what they wanted. Like that was actually was their
Mhm.
philosophy. And I do believe there was a period, yeah, right around 2014, like that was the only real reasonable way to get into top schools. However, I think they kind of got rid of that philosophy or they toned it down because it got figured out and these schools don't like it
Yeah.
when there's a very influential, college admissions article that goes viral that explains their entire philosophy.
Yes.
The other is I know I've made this joke before, but it's still true. I think these schools got mighty sick of a student writing about 13th century French poetry over and over and over again,
Right.
and then and all their extracurriculars are poetry, poetry, poetry.
Yeah.
Then they get to Stanford campus and ask where the computer lab is, and they're like,
Oof.
"So is poetry? Poetry? No, computer science.
Right.
I wrote about poetry, and there are no shortage of students today who are at or graduated from Stanford who are now engineers or computer science, and I've met them, and I'm like, "Wow, you applied engineering?" I go, "No, I applied computer. No, I applied I applied linguistics." And I go,
Oh my
"Oh,"
gosh.
and then there's an awkward pause because we both know what that actually means, but that's
Yep.
fine. Yeah, I think that's the real reason is it was like this system part of it being solved or figured out by knowers of things. It started being exploited, and you can go back to the strategic
Mhm.
positioning episode to kind of explain like that that really is the mindset behind strategic positioning is like you're making someone spiky in a less common major in order to get them in and they can do whatever they want. And because of that, I think the mandate of we want specialists to make a well-rounded class that was heavily downgraded to the point where they're kind of like now what do you want? It's like we want kids that are passionate about what they do, right?
Right,
And
right.
that is different. But certainly that does not mean that being spiky they punish it. And I write to this is the reason I still be like being spiky. I believe being spiky works because it accidentally forces students to submit highly competent, non-repulsive applications. And often, so this is what being spiky, like this philosophy, and it part of why I like it is it makes this process simpler and easier and less likely to go awry.
Mhm.
Because, well, I just, listening at home, I just broke down like what this girl's interests were and what her essays were about. And I think that's a pretty strong application. I don't know. I think like
Right.
it solves like if you are reading these applications, this girl seems pretty likable. You know, she likes origami math, and it makes sense. And it doesn't. And it's not like oh she's spiky. You know, like that's what we're looking for. It's more they're like oh okay this girl's really into math, and that's fun.
Mhm.
So if you are a student who has a lot of interest in one academic subject, I do encourage you to be spiky because often the hardest part of an application is knowing what to focus on and what to highlight. And that's a problem I
Right.
find I often find that with the most like the more elite a student is, often they would come to us. Their big problem is not that they don't know how to write or anything. It's like, what do they want? You know, like, what do these schools want?
Mhm.
I've done a billion things. I do care about all of it. I have opinions about all of it, but what do they want to see? And you only have I say about 1,000 words per school to write about your entire life. You get 600 for the Common App, and then around 350 to 500 for all your supplements.
Yeah.
And it isn't enough space to cover everything you've done. So what do you write about? It's like, well, you may as well be efficient. And I use a term like slice of life, I guess, is that like you break down what you have done and you kind of segment it into a really focused slice, which happens to be entirely based around the major you're applying for. It's like, well, how does
Mhm.
I look at the application, it's like, they're applying math, like you've done the most math stuff. You've also done debate and science, whatever, but like we don't have space for that. So like
Right.
let's just write about the math stuff you've done and we'll focus on that. And I find that to be very helpful for students. They go, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." And then we're off. We're just writing about math. And generally it's not a big fight because obviously they do like math. They want to do it in college. They're into it. It's an easy sell to explain like what we're going to focus upon. It's yeah, being spiky forces you to niche down into most focusing on a specific academic subject and how much it means to you, right? And that's just FLL. Like if you go back to
Yes.
the FFL episode, it is you effing love learning, as mentioned, and you may as well effing love the major that you're going to be applying. It like this is spike. It's not so much that my strategy is to make students spiky. It is that my strategy involved like being spiky is the most efficient way to do my strategy.
Okay.
Like that's kind of how I feel about it. Yeah, it also doesn't leave much room for bad essay topics that hurt your chances. I refer to them as landmines,
Mhm.
and there are so many ways that this process can go awry. And I actually think I tell students near the end of the process that they underestimate like how bad this can go because they work with me or they work with us and it's pretty
Mhm.
chill. We write about
Yeah.
how much like that application, it's safe in a good way. It's like origami math and teaching like that, those kind of topics are pretty easy to figure out. They're fun to write about, they're chill. And you write all, you're like, okay, cool. Here's my application. I get it. Well, without that guidance, students can write some really dumb things, and you really don't want to
That's
write
so true.
about you really don't wanna write about, like, a bad breakup or
No trauma
or
dumping.
yeah, or, like, a lesson you learned on the sports team, like, a lot of stuff that, like, doesn't
Yeah.
work very well. Well, conveniently, none of that stuff comes up in a realm where you are just trying to be spiky, like, that is the idea. It's also easier to figure out, it doesn't take much time and effort to plan, like, one of the little magic tricks I'm able to do, it's consultation season, is I look at their applications, like, "Yeah, we could do this, 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 and this," and they go, "Wow, really? Yeah, that makes sense." I go, "Right, it's because I'm just making you
Yeah.
spiky. We're just focusing upon the core academic subjects that you are going to be applying, and then we're coming up, and then it's my job to come up with a wacky, tell me the story behind it, like what you like about
Mhm.
it, and that is so much easier than trying to dig into your soul and come out
Yeah.
with like showcase your true passion. Well, your true passions are like what you're trying to study. I don't know, dude. Like this process, it's yeah, when I'm doing these notes and talking about it is like I do like being spiky. It is a good idea,
Mhm.
and however, that is different than me sitting here and saying that you must be spiky because that is what these schools want. These
True.
these schools don't necessarily know what they want, quite honestly. Like they want a lot of different stuff, and the spiky path it still totally works, but it's not because you're spiky. It's because they like your application and it makes sense, and they understand how you'll take advantage of their math opportunities. You seem like a good kid. Like that is why spiky
Mhm.
works. Pretty much all my students are either going to be in the spiky pile or the well-rounded pile, and
Yeah.
how spiky they are is going to vary a little bit by honestly how spiky they are. I have students that really only have math stuff. I'm like, well, you're gonna be a math lad. Often with those, it's you can often break down like you can niche it down. So it's like if you're just into math, often it's like what part of math. This girl with the origami math is gonna be very
Right.
helpful. It's not just that you love math the most. It's like breaking down different aspects of it. And generally, the more work a student's actually done in a realm, the easier that's going to be. 'Cause I'm trying to think of it's like sometimes the students will be more spiky like on like a concept like diligence or yeah, like even those they still were spiky about like I'm thinking of a cert that's super niche. Like there's specific students
Mhm.
I can think of. We went things a little bit differently, but those tend to be like almost exceptions that prove the rule. That I can think of like two or three
Right.
students, and even those at the end of the day, no, they were a liberal art. They were like a poli sci major. They were writing about poli sci over and over and over again. That was more just like
Mhm.
flavor. This is really just how I do it with like every single student, except the exception, the well-rounded students, which we'll get to. Yes, but I do so because of my general philosophy. It's easier more so than because being spiky itself the goal. I think that's the idea. Is do not has if this applies to you, if you make sense, you're like okay, cool. Like I do have a majority of extracurriculars and classes and stuff that match my future major. Like don't hesitate. Just make your just focus upon those, and you can use that template, like honest the template of your personal statement, like at least 60, 70% of your essay should be about that subject matter. If you want to do like a supplement about something else, that's fine. But I think I remember this conversation from last episode. It's like if you do 100% of essays about math, you'll be okay. You will. Is
Yeah.
like generally it's gonna be more though. Like yeah, like, either your personal statement is like I think I'll do a personal statement episode coming up. It's like often I like the personal statement in this case math like math tangential. It's like origami math is a good example. It's not really about like how much she loves math. It's about like it's tangential to math.
Yes,
Then
yes.
the all the Y school stuff. This is very important. Like totally hits the math. All you care about is math. And then you have another supplement that's probably also math based, honestly. And then you have a little bit, if there's like another supplement or maybe two more, then you have a little bit more flexibility to write about something else.
Mhm.
You major in math, you minor in robotics or chess or whatever else you want to write about. Like there is a little bit of space, but I will say like in that application, you're not getting into that school because you wrote about chess. Like you're going to get in because you're the math kid who likes math.
Right.
So if there's a really powerful story, something you really want to tell, like you do have the space there. However, don't hesitate to just do another math essay. Like I don't know if
Mm.
I'm sure I've done it by accident. I'm trying to think if I've had a student that literally just wrote about their major, every single essay, and that's
Mhm.
never been the plan, but I bet it's happened at least to some schools by accident. The one exception are the UCs. I will note here that the UCs want 4 different topics. So this is actually it's an important caveat is like that's probably why my students don't end up just writing all about one subject because we start with the UC application and the UCs want 4 different subjects.
Mhm.
So for those, usually like 1 to 2 will be about math in this example. Then we would do a third essay about chess and a fourth essay about bird watching or whatever the
Right.
fourth subject matter is. And I think like that like important to know is like the UCs in particular don't want you to just write about math. They want 4 things. But because that's how I do the process with students, I think that we inevitably end up with a non-math essay that find its way into the application because we already did it for the UCs. Like that's how I'm trying to think about like why I don't do only math because I think you can get away with it. Okay, so that's being spiky. It's pretty good. It's a good deal. And however, Michelle, what happens if you're well-rounded? And basically this is kind of how I see applications when I first meet a student. I look at thing and it's either jumps at me very quickly. It's like, okay, cool. You are going to be poli-sci lad or lass, and like, oh, but you really have an interest in gerrymandering. So let's talk about that, often about niching it
Mhm.
down. Tell me if you recognize this dude. I went through her resume and I just wrote down all the headers of different topics things that she had done. Here we go.
Okay.
Science internship programs, mobile app development, geospatial research, art website founder, animation club, future of business world program, art and photography, debate and business, writing, music, volunteering, dance.
Yes. Yes. I know who you're talking about.
So every year, I'll get 1 to 2 students that their resume looks like this instead. And well, I will tell them that like they're usually applying computer science just because they are. I don't know.
Right.
But so in this case, they're applying computer science, and generally, let's say it's computer science, there will be more emphasis than not on it. They'll have more they'll have app development and geospace but
Yes.
it is not a traditional computer science resume. I see those all the time.
Right.
So this has to be handled in a certain way. I will say. Not screwed. Very important. Not screwed. The speech I'll give them is that like they are well rounded, and then they will go, "Oh yeah, I know. What does that mean?" And I'll go, "It is not that being well rounded is itself a death sentence. However, the line between well rounded and unfocused,
Mhm.
that is the problem. You do not want to have a unfocused application, and that is where being well rounded. And the probably most important part is that if you just do a personal statement on building your art website, but then you have a supplement on your debate team, and then you have another supplement. You remember like you have something on your mobile app work because you're applying computer science, but then the Y school stuff is talking about all the different like art and writing and all the different stuff you want. That is not a
Yeah.
good application. That is a very, very, very weak application, especially at the most elite level. Very important because you are not giving them yeah, like you are not backing up your major is probably the biggest issue. Is
Mhm.
that if you are applying computer science, like these schools do not have a terrible amount of interest in your writing or music or art interests, like because if only because those those are for the art and or writing and or music applicants, like these schools segment stuff
Yeah.
out. And I do worry that that is where a lot of students run into trouble is, and even students unfortunately who have like a lot of good extracurriculars saying computer science or math, they will still just from a lack of understanding will make themselves well rounded. It is like it is all about like what you're focusing upon in your essays and bringing up. And that's how I think a lot of students don't do very well at the top level. Well, you're not.
Mhm.
That's why again why spiky is being good. You almost accidentally check all the boxes you want. In creating sending an application that just independently talks about different academic subjects with no real connection between them. That is what leads to. I always forget the term, but it's like something non-exceptional. It's like competent non-exceptional. There's a term in high level admissions
Okay.
which is kind of like the kiss of death, where there's nothing wrong with you, and they're like you're a nice kid, but you are not. There's nothing that stands out. That is the
Yeah.
exact type of application that receives that kiss of death and doesn't. It just doesn't work at the top level. So, but then that's why I'm. With most students, I'm like, no, we're math kid over here. It's so much simpler. But when I get an application like this, what do I do?
Mhm.
And I've basically built an entire alternative path, I suppose, to getting into schools. It's based around a well-rounded student. Right. So I mentioned three problems. The first, unfocused. The second problem is not that you shouldn't highlight all the different work in your application. You physically can't. We get to that. It's like you
Yeah,
can. There's not enough space to write everything. So you end up with a very choppy, unfocused, but even like undetailed version of it, right? And then
that's true.
third, unlikely all most of your work will help support a future major. I covered that. Yeah, is like you're not applying art and photography. So like the fact that you've done it is not very helpful, and writing an essay about it is really not going to be very helpful. Okay, so what do we do? We create an application that makes the fact that you're well-rounded the point, and that we like it's very meta, but your spike is your well-roundedness.
Like, I meant to do this. I
I
meant to
meant to
be
do
well-rounded,
that
yeah.
is exactly that is exactly the mindset. I meant to do this. And then I'm like, "You did mean to do this, right?" And they go, "If you say so, okay." So, the key to all this, and this is gonna sound like on the nose, but this is what I do, is begins with a personal statement that celebrates your variety of interests, usually by ripping
Mm.
off the Costco essay. So, Michelle, do you know the Costco essay?
I've heard of it. I don't know exactly what it's about, though.
It's a few years past due. It's one of the original meme essays. Basically, it's a girl who's in Costco and she's having a time of her life because she's exploring all her different interests via the Costco.
Oh,
And
okay.
I kind of wish that essay hadn't existed because I independently would have written the Costco essay with a student or come up with the idea because I did. It's like how there's multiple crab evolutions. Like the Costco essay is the inevitable endpoint for college consultants who do this over and over again on how to make a well-rounded student. It totally works. So what I do is the essay is about what do you do that combines all your varied interests? Stores work well, but also places like nature
Mm,
or while on airplanes. Those are all ideas I've had. So basically, the personal statement does a lot of heavy lifting here. And the personal statement should be basically celebrating your well-rounded. Another student he liked food, I remember, and we talked about that. Like, how does this specific thing, and you'll see why again stores are the best, or like locations. How is this place or thing where you celebrate all your different interests? And
okay.
I don't want to fully dox this girl where we chose. Well, like, it was basically like a hobby store, but yeah, you imagine, yeah, like a craft store or yeah, Costco is good because Costco has a lot of stuff in it. Yeah, the nature because a lot of stuff in nature. She brings stuff with
Yeah.
her she likes to do. Where else would apply? Like amusement parks,
Mhm.
libraries, somewhere that naturally encompasses the ability for you to take advantage of all the different stuff you like to do, but it's all centered in this one location or on this one greater hobby. That's why, yeah, like, what would a hobby be? I guess yeah, it's mostly it's why it's Costco. It's why it's places because it's like that concept is so obvious of like
Yeah.
how where does this all come together? Like oh, at the Costco or at the Barnes and Noble or at the Big Lots. I don't know. And this again, this might seem like too specific, but this is what I do. Like this is the
Mhm.
strategy. And basically, the essay should be that it's basically a montage type essay of you going through this location and talking about how you get a little paragraph here about your love of art. Like how do you explore that here? Well, now there's a
Okay.
paragraph about your love of cooking. Okay, well, how do you explore that here? And basically the essay then concludes with like a nice paragraph where you talk about that, like basically showing up like you are well rounded, you have all these like diverse interests, and that's what makes you you.
Mhm.
That should basically be the premise of the personal statement. And students listening to this, like you can modify it to not be a store, but like that basic idea is that like you do love lots of things. It's often a matter of how they all come together. And I guess this almost leads to the other one is generally the future goal for these students. We tend to spend a lot of time thinking about like well in your major what like theoretical position would require like writing and music and all the stuff you do. And often it's like
Mhm.
it's like a developer type role. So like video game developer tends to come up a lot, or like
Right.
website developer. Some sort of management type positions or higher up tend to make the most sense as like this is what I actually want to do with my life because that is how you're able to encompass both in the personal statement but also in your supplements all this different stuff you do is like that's something you can think hard about and you might have to do a little bit of like deep thinking about what your goals in life are and what you're going to be sharing, I guess. But that's basically step 2 is if you want to like because this all has to be in service of the say computer science degree you want to get at these schools.
Right.
Okay, well, what position or what like in what way could you combine your interest in writing and music? You don't have to pick all of them, but it should be a good amount of them like your side interests or your non like core academic focus, what kind of role would you still be able to do that? Yeah, with this one in here, we went in on the artwork and the writing work is that she wanted to be doing like design work. She wanted to be doing character design work
Okay.
for games or anime stuff like that. And that was quite effective because that was a way that like that does kind of mix her genuine art interests, her creation interests, like her well the core computer science stuff. Like that's kind of step
Right.
2 is like okay if you're gonna like how do you incorporate and generally, yeah, like, the more you can include in it, the more believable it's going to be that this actually was your plan all along, I suppose.
Right.
But if not, just drop but what you probably don't wanna do is just be like, ignore all the stuff you've done because you have such a diverse list of stuff. It's almost and generally, your core, in this case, CS stuff's not gonna be as strong as the competitors. You kinda
Right.
don't/can't just drop everything. It's like, "No, I just love coding because I love computers so much." It's kind of inauthentic when they see all the stuff you've done. So it's about figuring out how you the corp and I basically I bring up the X of Y here, which is a common theme of mine. It's like for essay topics or ideas, is the X in this case is your core major, we'll say computer science. The Y is the other work you've done. So it's what is the computer science of debate and business, or the computer science of writing, or the computer science of music. In this case, it might be the Y of X. Like what is the music of your computer science interest? What is the writing of your computer science interest? And that sounds kind of silly to be like you sit down and think about it. And this is how I drill students they do come up with some ideas. For this case, we found like the animation work is we came up. I was like, well, she likes to code. She likes to create animated characters that she puts into like music video stuff type work. I'm like, okay, is there coding involved? And then she goes, yeah. I go, great. Here's our essay topic, and we go.
Mhm.
It's often about that combination. It's like, but the key is like either it has to be either X or Y. Computer science needs to keep finding itself into your supplements as you keep going. But like, they can share it can share the stage with the other work you've done. But like that is the key. You do not just write an essay about like your artwork. It has to be about artwork and computer science, how it comes together. And if you
Right.
can't think of it, then don't write about it, I suppose. Like if you're really well rounded, you should have a large list of ideas and you should keep thinking of like keep like that's where you sit and think until you can find essay topics that do combine them. Okay, so then when it comes to Y school, yeah, it's like you're pretty much dropping all pretense and just writing about the computer science stuff you want to do. It's just easier, more effective. So like do not fall for the trap of talking much at all about how you want to be joining the writing programs or the music programs or
Okay.
or except unless it is matched with computer science. So like that
Right.
is and so that's I imagine, we have the essay where they're at Barnes and Noble and they're writing about all their different interests. Well, one of them mentioned is their interest in those you don't have to bring up the CS much at all. Like you probably should bring it up a little bit in the personal statement, but yeah, it's like you can just write about why you like art and how you engage with it. But then there's a supplement you write about how yeah you combine your art interest and your computer science to make this like web design thing. Well, now you can very much go ahead and just write about how you want to be learning more about web design and art and all that stuff in your Y school stuff.
Okay.
But really only if it's backed up by other work, by other some if you're able to explain either another someone or I guess in that essay itself, why that like this is all tied into like why the CS department can help you here.
Mhm.
And it's still the emphasis. And also, like, don't be afraid to just again drop the pretext and just write about computer science and like this is particularly when you're like the Y school stuff is you just want to learn coding, and then that's where you might get creative, be like, and that's when I'll apply that to my writing program somehow. Like I don't know, like that's kind of
O
that's almost flavor text. At the end of the day, you are a computer scientist still applying computer science, and the fact that you are well rounded is like there's a reason I don't do this very much. You see, that's a lot more
Yeah, yeah.
complicated than the than
There's not a
the
straight line to get there with
no,
this
no,
one.
and maybe that's and I almost felt a little like bad like outlining this is like I make the well-rounded students are some of the more complicated, difficult applicants I
Mhm.
work with. It is a strong, like a harder, and maybe like that's yeah. If you like this is your problem, like maybe like come check me out at collegewithmattie.com. Signups are going on all the way up until June when we begin. That is yeah, when I was writing this, I was like, "Dude, this is just proving why I make students spiky," It's like when I have to double
Yes.
back and talk about all these different ideas, it's gonna be much more dependent on the student, but this general idea, I guess at its core is like but this is still how I do it. It's always a much more complicated ideal versus when I talk about, yeah, being spiky, It's easy. You just put it together. So like that at the end of the day, it's like if you're not sure which one you're better tight upon, is err on the side of just being spiky. Like often, like I read again, if you have to, if you really are basically, yeah, it's like well-rounded is the plan B, the strategy. Like if it's obvious that we can't just like ignore 70% of the work he or she has done, in order to just make them a computer scientist. If it's more like 50-50 CS and 50% other, or certainly like 60-40, you can
Mhm.
get away with just like not really talking about the 40% you do, or like yeah, that 40%, one of it may be more important than the other, everything else you've done, that can be your other supplement. If you're really into
Right.
writing,
Okay.
well, okay, well, your personal statement and like the majority of your application is going to be computer science, and of course, like one supplement is about your love of literature, and you get it in. And I say that knowing that that essay will not be terribly relevant towards your odds of of admission. It's just there, But like that's fine. That's okay. That's what I do with a
Mhm.
lot of students. Yeah, like actually doing this, it just made it clear like why Spiky is goated. Like it's a shame that yeah, like I guess I can almost see why schools just made this like their actual policy for about 6 or 7 years there before they canceled it,
Right,
because
exactly.
it probably stemmed from the fact that they leading up to that, and even it posted is like the students they kept letting in over and over, and they realized were the spiky ones, and maybe like
Mhm.
maybe they reverse engineered, like convinced themselves like, well, it must be because we want a group of specialists who make a well-rounded class. That must be why we continue to accept a very specific type of student over and over and over and over again. Then that strategy got co-opted by college commission firms, people like me, and they're like, no, that's not it. We're not doing
Yeah.
that anymore. And now they're back to the original. It's like, well, this kid, this kid's a good fit. We'll let them in. So they're just letting spiky kids in still. And maybe that's why it's just gone back to how it always was. That's my theory, having looked into it. Okay. I'm sure we'll talk more about this because it's integral to like how admissions really works with it's all about theme applications. And I think this is a good breakdown. There is no third strategy, I will say though. It's like every student I've worked with, I could either slot into one or basically 70-80% are in the first, the other two. And that's because going towards those extremes is the best way to get in, because it makes your application make sense in the first place. That's my big takeaway.
Mhm.
Don't be in the middle. That's unfocused, and that doesn't work.
Pick a lane.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Pick a lane. Pick a lane. Thank you. See you next time. I am now taking on students for the 2025-26 college admission season. If you are a current junior who's looking for help specifically with their college application and essays, you should check out my website. It's collegewithmattie.com, and there you can see my services, my blog with other written posts, as well as book out a free consultation where you get a chance to chat with me and see how I might be able to help. Looking forward to meeting with you.